the idea that housing projects are for black people and home ownership is for whites. But this is created by the federal government. This is not a racist saying, I'm not selling my house to an African American, I'm putting a racial restrictive covenant on my house. That existed. That's an individual person practicing racism. This is federal policy, which is going to change the whole nation. And it's going to shift a large amount of wealth to one group and choose as losers a different group. So a developer, a housing developer, is building homes. He's being subsidized by the federal government. And he's building homes over in this neighborhood. The federal government comes into this neighborhood as he's building the home. They're of course, paying for all of this, and they're going to subsidize the mortgages when the houses get sold. And so they're checking this out, and they find that there's African Americans living where we're staying, and to the east of us. And they say, we don't subsidize in racially integrated neighborhoods. This neighborhood has to be racially homogeneous. We're going to stop the funding. So you're going to have to stop building. What has happened is African Americans have moved from down south, came to the city of Detroit, and found that Detroit has segregation, housing segregation, the main form of segregation in the city of Detroit. And that they're being concentrated in the Lower East Side, in the neighborhood that's going to be known as Black Bottom. And so some African Americans who refuse to live under those concentrated conditions have secretly come over here and built their own homes. Some have crossed over on the other side of 8 Mile into what is now Royal Oak Township, and they built homes over there, secretly. Nobody even knows they're living here. So they're working at Ford, they're working at some of the other factories, and they don't live in Black Bottom, they live over here in lean-tos, shacks, shotgun homes that they built themselves. That's where they're living, and they're living here clandestinely, incognito. They're here living, and the federal government discovers it after they start funding the building on the other, well, in this neighborhood, which it wasn't the other side then, but it's going to become the other side. The housing developers realize they're going to lose all that federal funding to build those homes. They're not going to be able to sell those homes, because who can buy them if they don't get that subsidized mortgage from the FHA? They're going to lose a lot of money. And they say, what can we do? We don't want to lose this. What if we build a wall that separates our housing development from where Negroes live? And the federal government says, that'll work. Make sure it's at least 6 feet. Make sure that Negroes don't come on the other side of it. Basically, they can come over there to work, but they can't live there, they can't party there, they can't. And by 1941, a 1/2 mile wall from 8 Mile all the way to Chippewa is broken up now because there are streets that run through it. There's a park at the end behind Bates Academy that blocks part of it off, but that wasn't there in 1940. So it went straight down from 8 Mile to Chippewa, and it blocked these two neighborhoods from each other. And of course, the federal government is subsidizing one side, and the other side gets no federal funding. This is a federal government policy. And this helps, number one, to create all white neighborhoods in cities and creates whole suburbs outside of cities. Many of the suburbs are created, largely there's little small towns with a few residents until this federal funding pops in, and then they turn into major suburbs, major cities with large populations. First after this Federal Housing Act of 1934, but then again when the GI Bill comes. Because when people come back from World War II, the federal government is going to offer low interest rate mortgages to the soldiers, except to the African American soldiers, who are unable to take advantage of the GI Bill housing plan, which offers those low interest rate mortgages and also no down payment on the home. African Americans can't use that portion because it uses the same maps as the Homeowners Loan Corporation created for the 1934 Housing Act. So African Americans largely the wealth gap is built on housing. When we get to 1968, this is the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which outlawed all this stuff. So now African Americans can legally go and buy a home everywhere. You can't have those FHA rules that says, no, we're not going to give you those loans. So African Americans, they go try to buy them a home. They go to Levittown, which was all built by federal funds from these housing acts. They go to Levittown. When they were trying to go to Levittown in the 40s and 50s, they couldn't go there because it was racially homogeneous. It had to be racially homogeneous. But now it's 68, it's 70. They try to go there, houses are $400,000. So they have the right to move there, but it's an empty right. because they don't have the economic wherewithal. There's always exceptions. There are some wealthy African Americans who are able to do that, but in general, they don't have the economic wherewithal. When in the 30s and 40s, when the income was similar, African American income in cities like Detroit was similar to white income in cities like Detroit, they could have moved there, but they were blocked then. Now, when they are able to go there, whites who were working class in the 30s, 40s, and 50s have moved up in income because they bought a house. 20, 30 years later, that house is now worth $80,000, $100,000. They used the equity in that home to open up a business, a store, sent their kids to college, built another bought a bigger house. African Americans 20 and 30 years later, guess what they have? They have written receipts from the Brewsters. There is no equity. There's no ability to build wealth. And so now you had a group of people who had income that was close. Now you have a wealth gap that is monumental. Much of what we're dealing with today is the legacy of these housing acts, 1934, 1937, and 1949. Those three housing acts have created much of the wealth gap between African Americans and created a relationship gap between African Americans and whites. Many whites will look at African Americans, you're always looking for a handout. You're always looking for welfare. They never talk about the fact that much of the wealth of the white community was built during the federal government's really welfare program for just one group of people, whites. They got a major welfare program called the Housing Act, 1934, 1937, and 1949. Finally, the state and city joins in. Areas that get federal funding for homes under these acts are zoned one way. Areas that receive no funds are zoned a different way. So cities and states say, okay, if you got no funds from the federal government, this area is open, should be open for liquor stores to be able to build. This area should be open for Marathon Oil or some other factory to be able to build. We're not going to build those, or we're going to try to keep those out of areas where federal funds have gone in to build homes and put them in areas that receive no federal funds. And so today, we're living with the legacy of those zoning policies that the state and cities came up with in response to what the federal government did. What we're calling inequality, wealth inequality, racial inequality, is really housing policy. That is a legacy of the federal government, not some individual practicing racism in the selling and buying of their own homes. Thank you for listening.
Have to have is the people in the community who not only live here but have experienced what this wall is all about. So what I like to do is I like to call up some folks, and I'm not going to be long because I want them to really give you a detail of people who have actually experienced from the time this was until now. So what I like to do is call up Dwight Smith, President Dwight Smith, who is the president of 8 Mile Old Timers.
And I'll just start off by saying, give yourself a hand for showing up today. Now, yes, my name is Dwight Smith. I am a third generation of the 8 Mile Road Old Timers. My family came out this way, as the young man was explaining, back in the 20s. And that's when this area was desolate. And the thing about it is, the people out here were family. They helped each other build their homes.
That's right.
I heard the young man speak of Sam Donahue. Well, Sam Donahue turned the old timers over to me. But he told me about this wall, a story about it. And believe it or not, on the other side of the wall was what they call Lover's Lane, where the blacks weren't allowed to go, but the whites went over there on different occasions. But I just want to say, that this is a wall here, but let's not stop at this wall. There was a fence that still runs along Pembroke.
That's right.
They didn't call it a wall, but it's a fence that the blacks weren't allowed to go beyond. Green Line was the dividing point. That was an invisible wall.
Wow.
Where the blacks out here in the community lived. But I'm just saying, this was a community built with different families which are still present. If you look around, you'll see people with Birdhurst t-shirts on. the Martin family, the Murphy family, the Austin family, the White family. They're still here. We're the third and fourth generation of them. Even the Ripton family. So the McLittles and the Harvards. We're all still around here. And we're celebrating the wall for people of interest to learn that it's bigger than the wall. Segregation is still here. It hasn't gone anywhere.
That's right.
They've just changed the name of it. But we as a people are determined to make this area work. They had plans to make this area a continuation of Palmer Park. But the people stood together and made this a beautiful place where the city council dropped that idea back in the 40s. A lot of people don't know that, but I could go on and on. But I thank you for showing up this day, and I pray for all of you to pray for this area on 8 Mile Road.
I'm Teresa Moan. I live across the street where the red house is, the yellow brick and the red house.
Can't hear you.
And I've lived over there since 1959, so I'm familiar, you know, with the history of the wall and what it represents. It always, for us, was kind of like a toy. We used it as a rite of passage. You had to walk the wall in order. Matter of fact, we have a T-shirt that says so. Our community over here is very strong. We've always been very dedicated to keeping the history of 8 Mile, you know, in everybody's minds, because we do have this stigma that says so much about what society represents for individuals, black and white, to try to separate people with a wall that's 6 feet tall, or not even 6 feet tall, I don't think, and 12 inches wide or 6 inches wide is kind of audacious and ridiculous. So we've always looked at the wall as just not a barrier, but just a wall. You know, it didn't represent what it was supposed to represent. It never, the point never got across to anybody that there's a separation between people. We're all just the same, you know. So like I said, our community is very strong. 8 Mile is a community that is full of love and dedication, and a lot of people who care about each other. We have a lot of community activities over here. We have an annual 8 Mile family reunion that is 18 years old. It's the second Saturday of August every year. And it's something that everybody over here looks forward to because we are a strong community. So I thank everybody for coming out. We have tours over here all the time. I've met people from all over the world that come and visit this wall. It's kind of amazing to us that people come to look at it. You know, but I appreciate you. Yeah.
It's July. I gotta lock you down. I'll send you the date.
Yes, please send me the date so I can get in as much as I can.
Yes.
All right. Yes, I did. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
We have no choice. Thank you. All of that.
We agree with. They want to have traffic control, what you need. So we want to find
Everybody, we got to walk. Come on, everybody.
Oh, now you're walking to 8 Mile. Right there, 8 Mile. State Highway.
Freaking out. I know she's not.
Hands across the mile road.